Thank you, Carolyn, very much. I'd like to thank of the chemical department and also particularly the student organization for the chemical engineering department. They have handled this conference with such poise and grace and great organization. I really think they deserve a big hand. So. I am not an engineer, I'm not a chemist, I'm not a scientist, I'm a designer, and so I bring a designer's perspective on a subject called bio-inspired design, and that is very simply using nature as an inspiration for problem solving. And engineers and chemists and all the rest of us have to solve problems all the time. The title of this talk today is Beyond Metaphor, and I wanted to talk to you about 3 themes that you might want to use in your problem solving. But first I have a few pet peeves, and one of them is this metaphorical sense that a lot of people have about bio-inspired design. You know, solar panels that look like lily pads and shoes that look like tiger skins, and then cell phone towers that look like redwood trees. Those are all metaphorical, right? They're not really looking at the principles of nature and abstracting those principles and then applying them to the methods and materials that we have at hand in order to solve problems. That's what we want to do. That's what you want to do. And that's why I've titled this talk, Beyond Metaphor. We all want to go beyond the metaphor. And today I'm going to suggest a few themes for you to use when you look at some of your problems, whatever venue they're in. I'd like you to consider some of these issues. So I have an agenda to talk about these trends and how bio-inspired design can contribute to some of these trends. And next, though, if we're going to talk about bio-inspired design, we're going to have to talk a little bit about what life is. So let's define life. Let's define the breadth and depth of life. And then once we do that, let's think about, well, what is the difference between biology and technology, nature and technology? And knowing those differences is pretty important if you're going to do that act of translation that you need to do. You need to translate these principles from nature to your problem. So it's helpful to know the difference between nature and technology. And then finally, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about 3 themes I think might be important for you. So let's start. So 4 technology trends that I think we're seeing today. Number 1, human-machine interface and the Internet of Things, right? We're going to see, and I'll go into each one of these separately. Second is mass customization. Mass customization and capability convergence. Number 3, expanding spatial frontiers. We have expanding spatial frontiers in our society and in our technological world. And then finally, 4, some biological paradigms. Biological paradigms, in other words, ideas from nature that become memes, become concepts for design, problem solving, are becoming more and more important. So let's look at 1. Human-machine interface, the Internet of Things, augmented reality, Nokia, Apple, Google, all coming up, Google coming out with a beta version of Google Glass. All this augmented reality is coming our way. And it's actually going to speed up this interface between humans, made of flesh and blood, and the world of technology, mechanistic devices. And Google Glass is an example of it. How does that relate to bio-inspired design in my world? Nature is very good at something called just-in-time information, giving the information to a site or to a mechanism just in time, not before, not after, just in time. And it has a lot of mechanisms that we can mimic to solve our problems for just-in-time information. And on the right, smart metering is an example of this Internet of Things. More and more things, machines, devices are going to be talking to each other. They're going to be talking to each other as systems,
and they won't necessarily need us interceding in certain tasks. So those things, I believe, are coming. So now that we've looked at some of those 4 trends, we ought to look at what is life. And of course, life has its characteristics, right? Metabolism, reproduction, growth, and all the rest. But actually, the list on the right is the definitive list for what is life. You got to have 4 organic molecules, right? It's got to have proteins, nucleic acids, carbohydrates, fats, and lipids, and all of them are playing key roles in putting together life. So we need to remind ourselves of that. And I have my design students do the scales, right? All the way from, atom, molecule, and so on and so forth, all the way up through the biosphere. You really need to know what scale you're working at, because different rules apply. That mosquito is flying through something that its experience is something like molasses. So that's a little bit about, well, what is life? Now let's talk about, the difference between nature and technology. They're different, right? So there's different goals in nature. Nature, the goal is to reproduce, right? To pass your DNA down to the next generation. Different criteria for success, and also different advantages and disadvantages. We've got the Cadillac on the left and the spiny katydid on the right. The spiny katydid has got a lot of advantages. It can repair itself, it can grow new parts, and so on and so forth. But it is stuck. It is stuck with that silly costume, right? I mean, millions of years of evolution have stuck that katydid with what it's got. That's all there is to it, right? It's got to operate with that. The Cadillac, on the other hand, as designers, I tell my students, you can be revolutionaries. You can make a revolution in form or process or system. The katydid cannot, right? So there's different advantages and different disadvantages, and we need to be aware of those. So, and not to belabor these graphs, but in nature, this is Julian Vincent, retired now from University of Bath, wrote a paper for the Royal Society in which he looked at nature versus technology. And down along the bottom of that on the horizontal axis, we're looking at scales from nanometers all the way up to kilometers, and in the vertical, we're looking at percentage of time that some of these parameters were used to solve a problem. So he picked a problem, and he compared nature with technology. And if you look on the left, and he picked 6 parameters, right? Information, energy, time, space, structure, and substance. A pretty good list. Pretty good list of parameters you might want to look at any problem. Can I solve this with time? Can I solve it with space? Can I solve it with some more energy? What should I use here? More substance? On the left, you're seeing G, and look at all that. Excuse me, I got that backwards. Yeah, on the left, you've got technology, and I don't know if you can tell the difference between the orange and the red, but the red is that big block, particularly on those small scales. That's all energy. So technology is basically using a lot of material and energy to solve its problem. Over on the right, you're seeing orange show up, information. Nature is using structure and information, according to Julian Vincent, more often, particularly in the smaller sizes. So if you can use information to solve energy and material, use that parameter, use space, use structure, use information, just-in-time information, to solve a problem rather than lots of energy and throwing lots of material at something, you got something going. And nature has a lot of lessons for that. Let's talk about 3 themes for solving some of these contradictions in your problems. First one has to do with structure, right? One of our phenomena that we can see in the world. The slogan is, little things multiply up. In nature, they don't add up, they multiply up. Okay, so that often in biology, that's called emergence, right? When some phenomenon emerges that you can't explain by a reductionist explanation of its constituent parts. So something emerges. So little things multiply up. The second has to do with energy. Surfing for free. We want to surf for free. I'm from California, so we always want to surf for free. And then third, and I'll explain each of these as we go along. Third, information. Aren't you smart? So again, if information can be used to save you time, money, expense, materials, energy, that's good. That's a good thing. And information, of course, is getting cheaper and cheaper as we go along. So I wanted to show you what I think is a champion exemplar of all three of those slogans in the natural world, and that is the hemoglobin molecule. It's building from the ground up, right? You have 20 amino acids in your body. I forget how many proteins you have, maybe 20,000 different kinds of proteins in your body. Those amino acids and how they're arrayed together are going to give you those individual proteins, and those proteins are then going to be folded and then joined together into some kind of a super protein like hemoglobin. And so it's very much little things are multiplying up. It's surfing for free because it's using actually its environment to change shape to do a job, and two jobs that are distinctly opposite. It's either carrying oxygen out or it's carrying CO2. You either want to get rid of CO2 or you want to bring oxygen into your tissues, and it does the same job. The same vehicle does the same job. They're totally opposite. And how does it do it? It changes shape. How does it change shape? It changes shape based on its environment. If there's more CO2 in the atmosphere, then those receptor sites are going to change, and I'm going to accept more and carry it and so forth. And it's opportunistic and adaptable. And so it's very smart, and the smartness is in the actual structure of the hemoglobin molecule itself. So little things multiply up. Here's an example of hair. It's going to be coiled, and then it's going to be bundled, it's going to be sheathed, and it's going to be coiled again. It's a great example if you want to look for a model for solving some kind of structural problem. Hair is a great one. You know how thin it is, and yet it has all these components in it. Another one is bone, of course, and then bone in particular, it's also functionally graded. It has different types of bone within your tissue. And it's also a living thing. This slide, not that we have to pick it apart specifically, but it just shows on the left and right how the bone is solving at different scales crack propagation, right? Cracking is a problem in materials. You want to stop cracks. And so how do you do it? In the bone's case, starting from the bottom up, those amino acids, are going to be coiled. They're going to have some sort of tensile resistance in that coil. But then they're going to be actually put into a composite. Collagen molecules are going to be interspersed with mineralized hydroxyapatite material, fibers, and they're going to be formed as a composite. And then guess what? That composite is going to be overlaid in different directions, cross-laid, and then bundled up, and then once it's bundled up, it's actually going to be functionally graded, or that material will be functionally graded within the larger bone. So it's solving this problem through a hierarchy of scales. Mrs. Fox here lives in a scary world, right? It's cold, it's windy, and so on and so forth. There's widely varied outside environment, but inside she wants to maintain that optimum environment. And so she's using that energy to keep that. She's borrowing that energy before she dies to maintain that optimum inside. So what does this have to do with surfing? From Limited, from Australia. Originally looked at, bacteria forms, it's messy, it's not sanitary. How do we prevent that? They actually figured out a way to make synthetic pheromones that interfere with the signaling that bacteria do amongst themselves. So bacteria now, they're getting the protein sites on the bacteria being blocked by these pheromones, and it's preventing bacteria from forming a film. So no film is starting, and it has applications in biomedical. The company's not doing so well, but the process is still worth noting Why is that important? It's because if you can interfere with the signaling of bacteria, that means you're not using drugs against the bacteria. If you're not using drugs, then the bacteria are not developing a resistance to drugs, and we're not creating superbacteria as these generations pass. So it's a pretty good innovation for antibacterial activity. Okay, here is a simple one-look thing. The Ultra Cane is using radar based on bat observation within the cane. Seems like a simple idea, but it's a vast improvement for someone who is blind. The sea urchin eggshells. This is one of the world's most beautiful buildings, I think. It's a gas station in Switzerland, but it's a thin shell structure. And then on the right is Frei Otto, Munich Stadium. Again, fabric structures. So you want it to be strong and light. There are different ways to do that. By the way, neither of these guys were really would call themselves bio-inspired designers. You know, they were just really curious individuals who were really obsessive about finding out how things work and how can I do something new. Little things multiply up. These are fire ants from Georgia Institute of Technology. Studying this, fire ants actually link up and float down rivers if they have to. Surfing for free, and then finally, aren't you smart? So let's be smart. Let's take a look at some of these ideas from nature and let's solve some problems out there. Thanks very much.